Hey there. Thanks for joining me today. I hope everybody's enjoying their week and summer. I know a lot of places in the country are kind of baking right now, but hopefully everyone's doing all right. What I wanted to cover today was a bit more precise into this question of consistency on channel switching. So I have recently posted a series of videos that I think many of my subscribers were watching while I was away for the summer. And there were a lot of questions that came my way, and one of them, I thought just really warranted discussion a bit further because it's become a core part of my whole philosophy and strategy, and I'm not sure, I don't think I've really addressed it clearly before. So I wanted to talk about it here today, and that is consistency in channel switching, and I wanted to describe how I came to that conclusion and why, and talk about some demonstrations and examples that'll help make it more clear. I mean, obviously, these things are ultimately up to each individual composer and their system. So essentially, when we're using channel switching instead of key switching, the objective is to not have to have errant MIDI notes in our MIDI that are functioning as key switches. With using channel switching, we can still have total control over switching articulations and using all those advanced features of our sample libraries, but without actually having to write MIDI notes. Instead, those articulations reside on different MIDI channels. This poses, however, a very, well, at first, a very glaring problem, and I'm hoping by the end of this video, you'll feel a lot more confident and comfortable with it. The challenge there is that you only get 16 channels. Now, if you think about it, with key switching, a lot of times key switching is set in very low or very high registers on your keyboard. So if it's a violin, then the key switches would be in the low register where the violin never plays, and vice versa. On a double bass, you might have the key switches in the high range or something like that. But you still have a limit, right, to how many keys are usually used as a key switch. Sometimes it's an octave or two. So we've got 16 channels in MIDI to use for channel switching, 16 only. There's no way to be flexible about that. It's 16. That's all the channels that are available in MIDI. Whereas with key switching, we have more than 16 keys, especially if we get creative. But when you think about your experience using key switching, I think many people would agree you don't need more than a dozen or so key switches pretty much most of the time. And if you really do, maybe there's a way to be a bit more disciplined in it about it. So you'll notice here my first bullet point is channel discipline. And I thought that was kind of a fun phrase for what this is. Realize that you've got 16 channels in MIDI to work with, and make sure that you are optimizing everything around that. Now, for me, in Dorico, I'm going to be using add-ons, and anybody who's watched my recent series, this will make a lot of sense. I'm using add-ons in my expression maps for all of the variations within a specific articulation. So for example, I designate staccatos to channel 3 all the time in all of my instruments, in brass, in winds, in strings, everywhere. Staccato is on channel 3. And it makes it easier for me to do any kind of troubleshooting or any kind of massaging of things when I'm composing. If something's not triggering right, I know staccato's on channel 3, and then I would use add-ons for maybe staccatissimo would be a variation on staccato. Maybe something like col legno might be another variation. It's obviously a short. So in other words, I'm using add-ons as a way of creating more articulations, even though I only have 16 channels. Now, my 16 assignments are definitely informed by my library. So in addition to what I got over here, avoiding mistakes, which I think I sort of alluded to there, the mistake that I think a lot of people are likely to run into if they don't have channel discipline is that, say, staccato's channel 4 in brass, but it's 3 in strings, and it's 6 in winds, but channel 6 in strings is pizzicato. And then they have to sort of look this up every time. It's very unlikely that they will memorize this easily. If you're very consistent, pizzicato's channel 6, just for example. Staccato is always channel 3, sustains are always channel 1, things like that, no matter what I'm on. So that's avoiding mistakes, right? The more that we can get confused, the more we have to look up information, the less consistent things are generally, the more likely we are to make a mistake. Omitting channels is the necessary sort of outcome of this, right? So if I designate a whole channel to pizzicato, that channel, and I maintain this channel discipline, this is the trick. I can't use that channel 6 for pizzicato on brass because brass doesn't do pizzicato. But my experience in having set this up with a broad variety of articulations is that add-ons give me more than enough variation, and 16 channels give me adequate variation for all of my main articulations. I separate out marcato from portato, from sustain, from legato, staccato, right? So I'm going to look at a demo here and just give you an example of how I might go about mapping this out. If you've watched my recent series, this spreadsheet will look familiar to you. But let's say that down here, I know that, let me zoom in on a little different space here. I'm going to put all my natural or sustains on channel 1. I'm going to go ahead and put legato on channel 2. I'm going to put staccato on channel 3. I think I put, generally, I might put marcato on channel 5, portato, just because these are the articulations that my main library Berlin series offers. Might be a little different from you. I think actually that's pizzicato and that portato's on 7. All right. Now, I don't often have marcato in my strings. I just have marcato in my brass. I don't obviously have pizzicato or spiccato on my wind instruments because that's a string-only articulation. But I do have staccato everywhere. I have legato everywhere. I have naturals everywhere. I have portatos in quite a few of the libraries. I think it's maybe in all 3 of the main tonal instruments. So by setting this up this way with unique channels, it means that when I'm doing brass, I'm not going to do anything on channel 4 because I don't have spiccato. And this is part of channel discipline. Is it a problem that you have to omit one of these channels, like for spiccato being on channel 4, and you just don't use that on brass or winds or percussion? Is that a problem? In my personal experience, no. No, it really isn't. It's pretty amazing that it's not a problem because you'd think 16 channels would be really limiting. So far, I haven't found it is. As long as part of that channel discipline is also that you're really only assigning bass switches and channels to really core fundamental articulations. In other words, if you have a variety of harmonics in your string libraries, let's say you have a harmonic soltasto and you've got a harmonic sustain and you've got a harmonic pizzicato, harmonic legato, those things. Don't create 4 channels where each one is assigned uniquely to a channel. You'll run out of channels and it won't really give you a lot more flexibility. Furthermore, it'll distract you from channel discipline because you won't, it would be absurd to then use, to not use so many channels that were appropriate for strings. You have to avoid them in brass, or you have to overwrite them, in which case you don't have that discipline, right? So instead, I would say just have sustains and just have, say, pizzicato, and then as an add-on have harmonic as well as soltasto. There's no reason why you can't put 2 add-ons onto a bass switch. So you've got your naturals or sustains, and then you can put on 2 add-ons of soltasto and harmonic, and now you've got all of that dynamic range of articulations, but you're still staying very strict, very disciplined on what's assigned to a channel. Okay, so let's just look at an example of that. Let's say I've got this natural and I want to control that, choose between sulpont and soltasto. So I might have soltasto is going to be, in my libraries, it would be CC70, right? In the Berlin series. Let's say soltasto, I'm just going to say this is a value, CC70 value of 35, whereas sulpont would be a value of 36. And so what happens now is that I can make any of these sul tasto or sul pont simply by changing the CC70 value. Now, typically I say CC70 value in this context, my add-on value, if you will, is 0. And that's where the root sort of base sample always resides, is on CC70 0. But if I want pizzicato and I want it, I wouldn't say that's sul tasto, but let's say that I wanted staccato and I wanted that sul tasto. Well, it would go out on channel 3, and the sul tasto would send a CC70 value of 35, and this would be registered as an add-on, which is why I keep this different table over there. And I hope that that sort of offers some clarity on how this is, to my fourth point over here, future-proof. Part of it is low maintenance. We want to, you know, I recognize that going through this process is extremely tedious. It's frustrating, but once you get it up and running, it's really, for me, has been a game changer. It's super reliable, and over time, I've memorized where those things are. I know staccato is always on channel 3, whether I'm on tuba or I'm on trombone or I'm on flute or clarinet or strings. So the future-proof aspect of this is also important, because if I get a new library, let's say I don't use CSS strings. They're a fantastic library. I just don't have it. And let's say I buy it and I load it up. A client says, hey, we really want these strings, or I'm collaborating with some composers, and this is the string library we got to use. Fine. I don't actually have to change any of my switching structure. I just have to make sure that staccatos are always available on channel 3. And that if there's a sul tasto available, that it switches with a CC70 value of 35 or whatever I set in my switching structure, right? So the switching structure becomes like a library, a template, so that when I get a new sound library, I can just load it up. And in that way, it's future-proof. I don't have to go and revisit this. I have found that I have to add on periodically, but it's always add-ons. Like maybe the baseline Berlin series did not include a tremolo pizzicato, it just had standard pizzicato. I think it had a pizzicato and like a serial pizzicato. Then I got some string libraries that were more like first chairs or something, and it had this tremolo pizz. So I had tremolo, I had to add that because it was set up as a bass switch for like normal tremolo, but I also set it up as an add-on so I could add it to pizz. I didn't have to go back and revisit any of my channel switching, any of my bass switches at all, because pizzicato is right there. I just have to go and add a new add-on. So if you get a library that has even more ornate variety in the articulations, you can just identify, oh, now I have harmonics. I'm going to add harmonic as an add-on, or, you know, I've got sul pont, or I've got whatever. I can add it as add-ons, and it makes the whole thing so much easier. And then again, it's true in all libraries. So if I get a marcato, I don't know, I start with marcato long and short, but I get a marcato bold, let's say. Well, then let's say I've got marcato bold in both brass and winds. In this new library, I just go and add bold in add-ons, and everything stays the same, and I've co-opted that into my new brass and wind library with a lot less stress, and I'm not having to go back and be like, oh no, I got to rewrite all my expression maps. Okay, so in answer to your question, Shubhas, how many add-ons can we have? Well, in this model, if I'm setting add-ons with MIDI CC values, and typically in the libraries that I'm experienced with, there'll be one MIDI CC number. In the case of Berlin strings or Berlin series, 70, CC 70. So CC 70 switches can be used as a switch. For I think CSS, it's 58 is the actual value, but it doesn't matter what the CC number is. Every CC value is going to have 128 options, 128 add-ons, in other words. And so if you can find 128, run out of 128 variations on natural, staccato, marcato, you know, I'd like to hear about it. I'll try and help you solve that problem, but I've been getting pretty ornate with my system over the last year, and I haven't even come close. I think I'm somewhere in the 30s, and I've been very, very liberal with myself as far as creating new add-ons. So 30, 40 add-ons, in my view, is likely the outer edge of what's really really even likely, but certainly practical. But you still have up to 128 values per CC. So, you know, if it's CC 58 in CSS strings, you can have a CC 58 have a value of 0 to 127. If it's 70, as in the case of Berlin strings, you have from 0 to 127, 128 add-ons. And from what I can see in Dorico, if you load up a bunch of add-ons, it doesn't stress the system out. It works very reliably and accountably. I see one more question in here. Have all the Berlin series. And yeah, you can use a whole lot of add-ons with Berlin strings. It's very true, especially if you have their other string libraries, you know, the first chairs or the solo violins, things like that. There's a lot more articulations in there. But if you do it all with add-ons, then it makes the channel switching a little more future-proof. And each add-on that you make, you know, it becomes a library. And for myself, and hopefully for everyone out there watching, eventually you get this one sort of spreadsheet that is just a very simple reference that'll tell you exactly what channel and what MIDI CC value to send to any plugin to get that. And then the job is, how do I get that plugin to respond to those two messages? As long as you can figure that out, then you never have to change that spreadsheet, and it becomes, over time, easier and easier and easier to troubleshoot if there's a problem and you're not hearing the articulation you like, to add on new articulations via add-ons, and also to memorize these things so they get cut down into your bones, because every time you compose, staccatos on channel 3, sustains are on channel 1, legatos are on channel 2. That's super consistent whether you're writing for brass or strings or winds. So that's where I'm going to leave it today. Yeah, I think 30 to 40 definitely sounds reasonable. I think you'll find that it gives you enough range in the add-ons. I am going to be back on Thursday. I'm going to talk a little bit about Cubase on Thursday from a standpoint of how you can navigate these large projects, because although I'm very much a notation first composer and I always love starting my projects in Dorico, I invariably have to take it into Cubase to do serious production and get the professional production quality I need, because Cubase is not a DAW, or sorry, Dorico is not a DAW. And when I do, I have this very ornate, complicated routing structure, and navigating that has recently become a lot easier for me since I made some discoveries that I want to share. So I'm going to talk about that on Thursday. If you have questions about this topic, or really anything else, or you want to suggest a topic, please reach out to me, post in the comments, and I always check those out, always follow up with people. And yes, I am all in on notation first. I love notation. I'm one of those weirdos. And I hope that everybody out there enjoys the video. Please like and subscribe if you're new to the channel, and I will